Hello and welcome to Rooted in God's Love, the masterclass series for Christian women who desire to feel the Father's unconditional love, get grounded in their true identity in Him, and courageously pursue their God-given purpose. I'm your host, Alana, and I use biblical truths and cognitive behavioral therapy to help women really be fully rooted in their identity in Christ, to love who God created them to be, and to wake up joyful every day living in their kingdom purpose. And today, I am super excited to introduce you to Dr. Caroline Leaf. Dr. Leaf is a cognitive neuroscientist, mental health and mind expert, best-selling author, and top health podcast host. She has studied the human brain for decades, and she has a passion for taking her knowledge to the body of Christ, connecting science and scripture. Dr. Leaf is the best-selling author of Switch on Your Brain, Think, Learn, and Succeed, and she has a new book, Cleaning Up Your Mental Mess. She teaches at academic, medical, and neuroscience conferences, churches, and to various audiences around the world. So welcome, Dr. Leaf. I'm so honored to have you here today.
Thank you so much, Alana. It's lovely to be with you.
So today we're going to be talking about cleaning up your mental mess, which is also the title of your book, which explains five scientific... Oh, there you go. Perfect.
Clean up your mental mess.
I love that. The sponge is great. Yeah. So it explains 5 scientifically proven steps to reduce anxiety, stress, and toxic thinking, correct?
Yes, that's right.
Yeah. So go ahead. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about that.
Absolutely. Well, basically the title "Cleaning Up Your Mental Mess" was very thoughtfully thought out. It's the name of my podcast as well, to level the playing field, so to realize that we as humans, we make mental messes all the time, and it's perfectly okay and acceptable. And we unfortunately live in a world where the sort of psychiatric model is of that we have brain diseases when we feel anxious, but that's not actually scientific at all. And whereas anxiety and depression, they're not diseases, they are symptoms of an underlying issue that's going on. And so an underlying cause, some sort of thing that's happened to us in the past, and then it manifests in these patterns of which things like depression, anxiety, etc. are warning signals. So I've been in the field for, as you mentioned, for nearly 4 decades now, and I practiced clinically for 25 years. And my field of study is the mind-brain integration and research. So what is the brain? What is the mind? What's the difference between them? What are thoughts? What are memories? What are emotions? And do we have any level of control? And I've done a lot of clinical work and clinical practice and clinical studies. And my most recent clinical study, I put one of them into this book, and that's nice and simple science. But I put that in just to show you how spirit, soul, and body are integrated, and the impact of when we capture thoughts and renew our mind, which is mind management, in a systematic way, we will change how we function. And, so we talk so much about renewing our mind and capturing thoughts, and we hear so much about mental health. And obviously with COVID, we hear that mental health is on the rise. And there's so much fear around all of that, but it's spoken about, but no one's really saying what it actually is. And besides, it's a disease, and you've got to have medication, which is not the case. And no one really talks in the church environments about how to renew your mind, how to capture thoughts. People quote the scriptures, but are they actually doing it? And if you think of it, it's a very profound concept. If you've got to capture every thought, that means that we've got to think, what is a thought? How many thoughts do we think? How often are we supposed to do that? How do you do that? Why do we do that? Can we even do that? And, what is renewing of the mind? I mean, they're nice concepts, but what are they? So in my work, obviously on a clinical level, I developed the theories and systems for how to manage your mind if you've got traumatic brain injury and learning disabilities and autism and Alzheimer's and severe trauma, war trauma or sexual trauma or whatever trauma, and just toxic behaviors and patterns that are impacting your life and getting you stuck. And then over the years, I've applied that in many different levels, education, corporate, and then just day-to-day living. We all human, so it's not just, you don't have to have a traumatic brain injury to benefit from mind management. As a human, you never stop thinking. If you think of it like this, your mind is the primary source of everything. Your mind never stops. You wake up with your mind, you dress with your mind, you eat with your mind, you're listening now with your mind, you have your discussions with your mind was with you when you wake up, go to bed. Your mind never stops. You can go 3 weeks without food. You can go 3 days without water. You can go 3 minutes without oxygen. but you can't even go 3 seconds without your mind working. So if your mind is always working, what is it, and can we manage it? And that's been the sort of primary goal of my research. And the 5 steps of the 5 scientific steps I've developed are meticulously researched over years of experimentation, working with all these different categories, from this very severe to just how do you manage if you have an argument, or you have imposter syndrome from looking at social media, which is a common occurrence these days, and just to the day-to-day stuff. How do you manage your mind? And I studied what happens in the brain as you deliberately and intentionally control your mind. So what is the impact, and how do you use your mind to control your mind? And the 5 steps are how you do that. So each step has meticulously worked out the sequence, the order, how it works, and what it does in the brain and the body as you do it. So it's simple, but it's got profound science behind it. And so the first half of the book, I explain the clinical trials and what is mind and the mental health mess that's going on, and what all how the impact of mind on brain. And the second half, I explain the 5 steps of the neurocycle and how to apply it for all these different situations, toxic traumas and toxic habits and all that kind of stuff. So that's so the neurocycle, the 5 steps I call the neurocycle, and everything I say is very scientific, and that's very significant for the whatever environment you're in, but specifically in the church environment, because science and spirituality have been seen to be at opposite poles. Meanwhile, they're 2 sides of the same coin. So just to put people's minds at ease, because everything I do is scientific and science is totally spiritual. And why do I say that? And that's because science comes from the word sclera, which means knowledge. And so therefore, God is the source of all knowledge. So therefore, science is the how-to of what God has created. So when you look at science like that, how can you not use science to actually understand who you are? So science is very, very spiritual. So that's kind of a big picture of everything. And I don't know if you'd like to unpack that.
Yeah, no, I love that. The how-tos, I think, are so important because, like you said, we hear, be transformed by the renewing of your mind, hold every thought captive to Christ. And we hear those verses and we say them, but how do we actually do it? So I love the scientific how-to. So maybe you'd be open to unpacking a little bit about these 5 steps. I know I would love for people to, pick up the book and read the whole thing and get all the details, but could you unpack them maybe in a nutshell?
Yeah, absolutely. So maybe we should just start the process by, I'm going to use some props if that's okay with you. And is everyone watching, or is it also audio? Is there audio and video?
The video, yes.
Okay, perfect. So people can see. Okay, so I'm going to unpack it in this way. I'm going to explain the mind and the brain, because that's, in order to understand the 5 steps, you need to understand the difference between the mind and the brain. So I'm going to use some props and then just explain what a thought is. And otherwise, these words go out there and they just, currently in this day and age, because of the last 40 years of how we've become so focused on brain in terms of science, we've forgotten about the mind. We almost have neglected the mind side. So people use mind and brain interchangeably. And if you see mind and brain as one, you won't, it's not correct, and it's not going to make the same impact. So I'm going to explain the difference, if that's okay. And then with props and what a thought is, and that'll make it really easy to then understand the 5 steps, which is the neurocycle. Okay, so basically your brain is not who you are. Your brain is only 1 to 10% of who you are. So if you think of it this way, here is another little model I'm holding up. Your mind and your brain are 1% of who you are. And the brain and the body are 1% of who you are. And the mind is the other 99%. So what is mind? Well, if you die, this all disintegrates. When you're alive, like now we're alive, we're listening. So what's keeping us alive? What's our aliveness? It's our mind. So what is mind? It's our spirit and our soul. Okay, so if you want the Christianese side, if you want the scientific side, it's basically, and science is spiritual. The way that we have been created is that all this physical structure is innovated, is the aliveness of this energetics, of this physical structure of the brain and body, is through the gravitational fields of the mind. So we can use the science of quantum physics, which is one of the most fundamental, it is considered the most fundamental and accurate and base of all other sciences. And it talks about what we can't see, the non-physical. And it explains that, and Einstein was very involved in this work in the early 20th century with the mind and photons and the photoelectric effect, which he won the Nobel Prize for. for. And it's in this region of study. So my brain is easy to understand. Brain is part of body. Brain and body are physical, and that's around about 1% of who we are. The other 99% is this aliveness, this gravitational field that is around and through the brain and the body. So to understand this very easily, if you walk past someone and you just get a little shock that, you walk past someone, or you're unfolding like a blanket and it like clings to you. That's the photoelectric effect. That is actually the electromagnetic field that's around you. That is where the mind kind of resides in terms of, we don't know how big and how far. We don't have science advanced enough yet, but we do know that we have specific gravitational fields that are designed to match our physical, which makes total sense. And we also live in gravitational fields. That's why we don't float. We have got gravitational fields on the earth. And just a couple of years back, Nobel Prize winning scientists won a Nobel Prize for their work on the gravitational fields and how we can start measuring them and how we can understand the uniqueness of the gravitational fields around humans. So all this gravitational field stuff that's actually our aliveness is our spirit and our soul, and it's what's keeping the brain and the body going. In other words, the brain and the body are this physical thing that responds. Now, this is very significant because if we are as humans, we're in life and we're experiencing life with our mind, as I mentioned. So when we wake up, we are immediately starting to transform the experience of life through our mind into our brain and our body. And that is a kind of an experimental process because we can't control events and circumstances. We don't know the future. So it's kind of a touch of trial and error, think, feel, choose. So we're doing this all day long. To help us understand this, right now, as you're listening to me, all of the listeners and viewers, you are getting you're hearing words, but the reason you're hearing words and seeing me is because you are taking the electromagnetic sound waves, electromagnetic light waves, and the sound waves, and all the sensory information, and which are in electromagnetic wave form. You are literally taking that's coming at you, and it's your gravitational fields, your mind, which is your thinking, feeling, choosing. Mind is think, feel, choose. So you think, feel, and choose. So that's all this activity in the gravitational fields, but psychologically it's you think, feel, choose, think, feel, choose, think, feel, choose. And you take this information, you think, feel, choose, which is kind of your processing, you push that through the brain then responds electromagnetically, chemically, and genetically, and it converts what you are hearing and seeing into little protein structures in your brain that look like little trees. So these trees are thoughts, and I'm holding up this little green tree, and obviously,
I love the props.
yeah, I know, it makes it so much easier to understand, doesn't it, Alana? Because otherwise these things are just these, the concepts are too big to not simplify. I know that doesn't make sense, but I'm trying to simplify huge concepts because otherwise we just say scriptures, or we just say things. We just get your emotions under control, whatever. I'm trying to help people to understand this very tangibly so that you realize the autonomy, because we have been given autonomy and agency. We are able to think and feel and choose. We see that I lay before you life and death, blessing and cursing. Choose is throughout the scriptures, and through all religious texts, you will find this concept of humans' ability to choose. And in quantum physics, for example, the most fundamental principle and law of quantum physics is that it's the science of thought. And that it's humans thinking, and it's our thinking, feeling, and choosing that changes the nature of who we are and the nature of the world around us, which makes sense because whatever you think, feel, and choose builds these thoughts into your brain, and these become the source of what you say and what you do. So to quote another scripture, as a man thinks in his heart, so is he. So this is real. We convert what we see and hear as an experience into our brain. And as a tree has roots and branches. So as I'm speaking, so as you introduced me, you introduced mind, brain, and you introduced that I'm going to talk about, this mental health stuff. So that would be the name of the tree. Like you have a fir tree, you have this particular thought is about mental health, mind, brain. But as I'm speaking, I am giving you the root information, the origin story. So you're converting my words into these root protein branches. And then as you listen to me, you then transform that into your interpretation. So the branches and the leaves are your interpretation, the behaviors and the emotions and the data of how you view this information. Because each of us, as we know, is unique. So we each have a unique perception. So we're all hearing the same information, but we're converting it and into our own interpretation. Then this collectively, the roots, which is the data, source data to your perception of the data, then produces what you say and what you do. So this is healthy. This is a nice, healthy green tree. This is healthy information. This is going to produce positive stuff because you learn to manage your mind, etc. But if I have a toxic tree over here, and if you see me on, I think Stephen Furtick, you saw me on, you would have seen me hold up all my little trees and everything. So this is now the same thing. It's a tree, but you can see it's distorted. So we see in the brain that a healthy management of our mind results in a healthy thought. And that means the proteins are folded correctly and all the things that should happen are happening. This is a distortion. So it's still, there's the origin story, there's the something toxic, maybe it's a trauma or bullying or whatever negative experience, that then is the source that then produces your interpretation. But these proteins are not folded correctly, so they're imbalanced and so on. And this is recognized by the immune system of the brain and the body in the same way that it would treat a virus. So for example, like COVID virus, the COVID virus is an invader. It's threatening our survival. It's working against our design of love. We are literally wired for love in our brain and our body and in our mind. And so the immune system would fight COVID or any virus or bacteria in your body. That's what the immune system is there to do. But this toxic thought is treated the same way. So toxic thought is seen by the body's immune system and brain's immune system as a threatening to survival. So it creates inflammation. So because our mind works through our brain and our body and stores the thought in the brain and the body, if it's toxic, our brain and body get messed up. Messy mind, messy brain and body, right down to the level of our DNA, our telomeres. And I give all kinds of examples in the book of when I did my research and I looked at the different biomarkers, like for example, cortisol. We all know about cortisol. And when you're very toxic and like worried about things, your cortisol levels rise and your blood markers for inflammation rise and your DNA is not functioning like it should and you're vulnerable to disease. And so I showed that link and I showed that through managing your mind, which is basically capturing the thought and renewing it through a process of embracing, processing and reconceptualizing. You can actually then fix the brain. You can fix the body because the brain is neuroplastic, as is the body, as is the mind. And when I say you, that means that there's kind of like two yous. And the one you is this made in God's image you, which is the wise mind, which is the wired for love mind, which is the optimism bias, which is survival, which is what God is. God is love. So therefore, we have that. It's so interesting. The scientists have shown that when we are in a state of peace, the waves in our body and through our brain are in this kind of love wave form, kind of like in a beautiful sea scene. If you're looking at the beach and you see the big swells and then they get a bit smaller and then there's the peak and then there's the crest and then it's on the beach and the ripples. And so it goes back. When we look inside the brain, we can look at those energetic waveforms. And when someone's at peace, you'll get a balance between all the data, theta, alpha, beta, gamma, the blood flow. So we see immediately mind influencing brain, bam, mind being so messy mind, messy brain and body. But if you clean up your mind, if you manage your mind, you clean that up. So basically, when I talk about mind management and the neurocycle, it's the how-to of capturing a thought and renewing the mind. So very quickly, how many thoughts do you think? If you've got to capture all your thoughts, how often should you be doing a neurocycle? Well, you're always thinking, always feeling, always choosing, always building thoughts. We build somewhere between 8,000 and 10,000 thoughts every day. And as we build them, we recall our thoughts that we've already built because we use our existing memories to build new memories. And we're recalling those at the same time. So in any one day, we can have 8,000 to 20,000, maybe 18,000, maybe 150, but it's at least around about 18,000 thoughts that we are recalling and building in a combination, maybe 8 of 1 and 10,000. In other words, there's a lot. And the scriptures say, bring all. That means that every moment you're conscious, you're supposed to be evaluating. Whoopsie, I'm building one of those. That's great. I can carry on. Oh gosh, I'm about to build one, but I mean, I've got this anger thing or this irritation thing. Which one should I do? So we're supposed to be self-regulating. And we see scientifically we can do this every 10 seconds. So that is a tall order. That means that I'm supposed to be constantly, while I'm consciously awake, connecting with the Spirit of God, connecting with wisdom, connecting into that wise mind, the wired for love mind, to then manage the messy mind. And it's also okay because it's okay to have a messy mind. Anxiety, depression, etc. These are not illnesses like we've been told. And I explain a whole chapter on the mental health model, which really goes against how we are designed and against the truth. Depression and anxiety are simply simply warning signals saying, hey, something's going on. You need to get like Jesus. You need to get in the garden. Jesus models mental health for us. And I'll quickly explain the 5 steps using the model of Jesus in the garden, because it's just super easy to understand. You've got to face the stuff. So if you think of it, we've all got our individual issues. Jesus models that only he could go to the cross. So that's symbolic of only you've got to, no one can fix you. You have to do your own stuff, but you can't do it by running away and dragging it and avoiding it and suppressing it, which is causing brain damage, because if it stays there, the inflammation carries on. That increases your vulnerability to disease. We have to manage our stuff. So the minute we shift from suppressing into embracing, when we get in the garden, we shift this damaging our brain, and we shift 1,400 neurophysiological responses that are working against us, and we make them work for us, which is phenomenal. So in that moment, you still got the stuff, you're still anxious and depressed, and that's okay. There's no shame in those. It's not an illness. It's not a brain disease. It is a response. It's a warning signal to an underlying cause. And so you want to embrace that, and then you want to process it, which means you've got to work through it. And it's going to get worse before it gets better, which is called the treatment effect. Jesus got beaten up and then went to the cross. I mean, it really got bad, but that's the process. It's a progression forward. Jesus even said, take this cup away from me. Many times we don't want to face it, but it gets worse before it gets better. We live in a society where as soon as things get bad or any emotions are toxic, oh, that's bad. Slap on a scripture, use God as a genie, scriptures as a band-aid, get your drugs. That's not correct. That's not the healthy. And we've been doing it for the last 40 odd years. And this philosophy, and it's damaged people. It's increased problems. We don't have mental health increasing. We have mismanagement of mental health increasing. Since the beginning of time, man has battled with mental health. So 100% of people have battled with mental health because life is tough, but we're not teaching ourselves how to manage it. Okay, so this is all about the science of capturing thoughts and mind management. So we've got to embrace it. We've got to get in the garden. We've got to gather awareness of it. We've got to then reflect on it. So Jesus goes through a process of reflection, and then Jesus turns to the disciples and says, can you not be with me for but an hour? He didn't ask them to take his place, give him drugs, get him out of there, fix it. He just said, can you support me? And that's the role we play for each other. We can't fix anyone. And we've got very, especially in the church world, people trying to fix other people. And then if they don't get fixed with enough scriptures and stuff, they get guilt and condemnation. And why aren't you fixed? You don't have enough faith. A lot of toxicity in that area. So we need to get freed from that, because depression and anxiety are helpful messengers that are warning us that something's going on that we need to face. And Jesus models that by showing that if the scriptures say that he actually took everything on him. So Jesus experienced anxiety, depression, etc., because that's how it gives us permission to go through it to find the message. And so things will then get, Jesus rises again. So with the wounds in his hand. So once you've gone through the process, you will then reconceptualize. You don't obliterate your story. You have the marks of your story. So very quickly you gather awareness. You embrace, you take, and embrace means, it doesn't, I'm not saying like get in, it's embrace. You embrace something that is helpful. You don't embrace, so it's the concept of, I bring it into my field. I'm not threatened by it. I'm getting in my wise mind. It's okay to feel guilt and shame and condemnation, as long as you know how to manage it, own it, and then change it. So you feel those, they're bad if you get stuck in them. But if you own them and say, I'm feeling shame, why? I'm feeling condemnation, why? So you shift. And then you are going to reflect, which is a deeply, enormously powerful thing. If you shine a light through a prism, it breaks up into different colors, which means there's a lot of depth to why you are experiencing those particular signals, the emotional, physical, perspective, and warnings, behavioral, these different warning signals. And I checked for you in the book exactly how to identify the warning signals. And then the second step is you've got to reflect on those. So first gather, but gather in a way that you're in control. So it's you with your wise mind, the pilot and the co-pilot, pilot being the messy mind, co-pilot being the wise mind. And you're not under the apple tree with all the apples falling on your head. What you are is you're standing back and you're picking the apple, so you control the process. So the minute you say, okay, I'm feeling depressed, it's okay, it's a message, I'm now picking the apple, I'm gathering awareness, I'm going to reflect. So you're controlling with the wisdom. So you're working together, as opposed to being hit by life and and you're burnt out and try and slap a scripture on that and wonder why it's not working and then say the devil's attacking me, which is the standard kind of thing that people say. So you got to do the work, and you do that, reflect, and then you write, and then you recheck each step, and you end with an active reach. Each step is very systematic. Each step is doing something in the brain, and you do that for 15 to 45 minutes each day for 21 days. After 21 days, you would have broken this down and reconceptualized it into this. So your story's still here. You still remember how you were, but you've now changed how it plays out into your future. You're now controlling that. But after 21 days, it's not going to change your behavior. You have to go for a full 63 days. It takes at least 63 days to build a habit. That means that you've got a strong enough base that then impacts your behavior. Anything less than that, you're going to know you've done the work, but you're going to feel stuck because you haven't got enough. The plant is not strong enough. It needs to be watered for the extra 42 days. So it's 63 days to completely transform. So I explain that whole process in the book, and I also have how to use it in the moment. So let's say that you just about to do an interview on a podcast, because we're doing that, so it popped into my mind, and something happens in your family, or you get this text message and it's like, oh gosh, I've got to deal with this, but now you've got to do this. So you have to kind of get yourself together to be able to focus in the next moment. There you can use the 5 steps very quickly to get yourself back on track, because as you do them, you are directing the neurochemistry of the brain and the neuroplasticity and the oxygen, and changing your body responses, your neurophysiology, and you're getting your messy mind under control so that you can do the next activity, and then after you can then go and solve the problem, that kind of thing. So it's in the moment. Let's say you're looking at Instagram and you get, as I said earlier on, imposter syndrome. How do you get yourself that under control? Then you can quickly go through the 5 steps. So you can do it in the moment, because we've got to capture thoughts all the time. So the more you do it in the moment, and the more then you also do it daily, and the more you do the neurocycle, allocate a 15-minute block per day. Over time, as you do that during the day and every day, and then when you finish one cycle, you start another, because we've always got so many things that we've got to fix. It's not like you're renewing your mind for the rest of your life. So there's always these patterns, and we develop new patterns without even being aware. We go through a new trauma, and that impacts, and we only pick that up maybe 2 years later. So we always renewing our mind and always capturing our thoughts. And the more you do it, the more self-regulated you become. And self-regulation, in my final sort of statement, is really proper prayer. It is you connecting with your spiritual part of you that's made in God's, all of you is made in God's image, but we have this gift of free will. So the middle part of your core of who you are is this wise mind. And as you tap into that, you're tapping into the Spirit of God, and you are accessing that wisdom. You're accessing loveness, Godness. I like to talk about loveness and Godness, because I think we make God fit into our little view, and that's too small. We've got to go bigger. So, I mean, that's a lot that I've said, but trying to give you a big overview, and they can get all the details, from the book, and I've got apps, and I've got a podcast and all kinds of things to expand on this.
Yes. You have lots of great things going on, and I love your teaching, because it really does come down to just being rooted in God, being rooted in love, right? And growing those roots, and just like
Absolutely.
you said, watering the plant, using your mind, and that's beautiful. And I just want to thank you so much, Dr. Leaf, for coming on today and just sharing so much of your wisdom and experience and insights with our audience. And those of you tuning in, be sure to catch the next masterclass on being deeply rooted in God's love. Thanks so much.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching. If you connected with this content and it helped you in some way, please like, subscribe, and share this video. Also, check the description below for special gifts just for you. See you in the next video.